Hello, it is Jay Foss finally back with the fifth and final part of the Overrated, Underrated series. Like I've said in the past, just because my opinion is that they're underrated doesn't mean they're the best hero ever, and just because I say they're overrated doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. This color will be yellow, the holy element, and I will say this one was far and away the toughest one to do. Numerically, there are just fewer yellow heroes, and it was tough to come up with a good list for both categories, particularly the overrated, so that's why it took a while, but let's get started. Alright, first up for overrated, I have Agnes. Now, as I mentioned in the past, I have all these stats of every single hero in a spreadsheet that I'm referencing in the background while I'm doing this, including the special damage. So I'm going to mention why she's just so fascinating and what I don't like. The 556 attack is very good for a 3-star. For all the yellow 3-stars and variants, it's number 1. And across all 134 3-star heroes and variants, and this includes the updated Atlantis costumes that added Melia and Menesis, so early May 2022. It's third, so it's very, very, very high attack, which is what you want in an attacking hero, and I typically like this. The defense is also not bad. The defense among the 24 yellow 3-star holy heroes ranks 4th. It's very solid. So no complaints there. Good defensive stat. I think this is where the hero gets into trouble, and I'll talk about my personal experience and sort of what's changed after this. 491 health is extremely low for a 3-star. Across all the 3-star heroes and variants, by my count, there are 134. That is second to last, behind only Muggy. So, and as far as the sniper damage, it's good. For guaranteed upfront damage, it's across all 3-star snipers is second for guaranteed upfront damage. But most likely, a hero like Poppy is going to exceed that in an expected value. If you remember, Poppy has a condition tied to potentially more damage. So in the long run, I would guess with a high degree of confidence that this is going to, in the long run, out damage, especially when you factor in survivability. Now going back to Agnes. So this is a hero I had at 20 for a long time. Generally with attacking heroes, I really actually like this split of high attack, high defense, and sort of HP as the stat that can be sacrificed. So I like the stat distribution. I like the potential high upfront damage. I like the speed. I hate the HP. And I used to have her at 20 emblems, and I ran her for a decent bit. So what changed? Well, Poppy came out. That's the big thing. The other thing to consider for tournaments is that yellow actually has pretty good fast options. If you think of Poppy in Bloody Battle, Kvasir makes little B minions in Bloody, but almost all formats for him. You think of Melia for buff, who's fast. And in my experience using her, particularly in Bloody, that 491 really hurt, even with the rogue class helping dodge. So you think she doesn't really factor in buffs into buff booster. Not particularly. There's so few hit 3 and hit all heroes in yellow for hit all. Let me make sure I'm say this correctly. For hit all, it's only Armon, who's from Sands, and Melia, who's from Atlantis. For yellow 3-star hit all, and for hit 3, it's only Dawa. Or for hit 2 or 3, it's only Dawa and her variants. So there's not a lot of... What I'm getting at is in Rush, if you wanted to use yellow at the 3-star level, you may be using fast heroes. But with the power of the other heroes in the other formats, and her low survivability, it just didn't pan out for me, especially, and like I said, when Poppy came out, that was the turning point for me, and I basically switched to Poppy. And if I want to run yellow in a tournament, a lot of times it's Poppy, Melia, and Kvasir. So not a bad hero if you like her. Obviously, you probably know the strengths and weaknesses by just looking at the HP. The chance to bypass isn't huge at the 3-star level. Not as big as it would be at the 4 or 5-star level. But, yeah, not terrible. I generally do like heroes that are built like this, sort of high risk, high reward. But a lot of it's this difference, right? So like 556 for yellow 3 stars, that's number 1. But number 2, which is the new Melia costume, is 534. So it's relatively close, only, 32 difference there, right? This defense is good. It's 4th for yellow 3 stars. But there's not this huge jump, right? They're all sort of kind of clustered together. And you get to this part where she's got the lowest HP for yellow 3 stars at 491. And the second worst is regular Dawa at 679. That is a massive, massive jump of almost 200. So to where these both are a little bit better, this is just way, way, way too low, in my opinion, to be effective. If it was even, I mean, it's incredibly low. And you look at, I know this is kind of an odd example, but if you look at 491 HP, right? You look at 3 stars with fixed damage. Let's say you're using her in Rush. That's 108 per turn. That's more than 20% of her health per turn, where some of the 3 stars now are over 900 HP. So, for all those reasons, I have Agnes in the overrated category. Next up for yellow overrated, I have Guldenbursty. Excuse me. Guldenbursty is a cool hero. His attack and defense are very low. His HP is very good for a 4-star, ranking number 1 for yellow 4 stars and 14th out of 144 overall for all colors. He can boost health. He can give himself plus attack, which can help with the end effect where he can deal some damage. So what Guldenbursty is good at is if you're struggling to complete the map stages, so season 3, 4, 5 hard, whatever like that, he's very, very valuable there. He's definitely very good in the 4-star rush tournaments and could even be serviceable into the 5-star level. This special, he has some very unique synergies with Snow White and I believe Guardian Gazelle, to where if you fire him first, then either Snow White or Gazelle, it can basically get the heal and then do the damage right away. And he's decent in the tower for completion runs. So I said a bunch of positive things, so why is he on the overrated list? Well, so often I see this guy listed as a no-brainer limit break type hero. Like one of the best 4 stars, basically, is sort of the context I see him mentioned in groups, and well, maybe not one of the best, but a very, very good one, definitely limit break. But if you are at the point in the game where you're completing the map stages easily, and I would assume most people watching my videos are at that stage where they can complete the map stages easily, that doesn't leave as much utility as I think people think he has. So this is a competitive area with the 4-star yellow and 4-star support heroes. This guy's average speed with a very powerful secondary effect. And even if you're looking at rush, let me point this out here. He can cleanse himself to include mindless attacks. So if you're thinking of countering Alfric or whoever in rush that creates status effects, he can cleanse himself and is faster and has a good secondary effect. We actually have a fast 4-star yellow healer. Somewhere. And now there's more ways that you can block this negative part. So the talent skill, I believe, can block it. I've never had emblems on her, but I'm pretty sure the talent skill has a chance to block it. And you have all these other heroes, particularly Poseidon in yellow, that can block this if you're running her. So you have pretty good competition that's faster in the healing support role. And I'm not saying he's bad, but if you're using him in regular war as opposed to just rush war and rush tournaments, I would seriously consider looking at one of the other healers I mentioned, Lady Wullerton or Deandre. Great at the map, very good in the tower, but for just generic fighting and war outside of a few very specific synergies, I very much would just personally prefer one of those two that are faster, particularly Deandre, in this current setup of purple tanks with teams that fire super fast. So a little bit of a controversial pick. I don't think this is a no-brainer guaranteed. You need a limit break. I'd say if you, like I said earlier, if you're having trouble completing the maps, or you want to complete the tower, or have those specific synergies, but for regular day-to-day play and war hits, I would go with one of the other two outside of rush. So for those reasons, I have Guldenbursty in the overrated category. Next up for overrated, I have Thor. Thor was highly anticipated as one of the final heroes for Season 3. This was, I believe, before the ninjas, and I kind of think this was their first kind of testing the waters for charge mechanics, but it's not charge. So he'll fill and then fire 1, fill, then fire 2, fill, and fire 3, and then fill, then fire 1. Again, if that makes sense. So it's just underwhelming. Especially, there was a time, I'd say especially before Odin and Akarog came out, and Odin came out around the same time as Thor, that there weren't a lot of good yellow defenders. Way back in the day, you had Guinevere tanks, you had some Onatel and Neith flanks kind of mixed in there at some point, but you didn't see the yellow destruction and the huge options that you had that you do today. But now there are options, and this just simply doesn't hold up in terms of expected damage across the charges. If you were to put a level 11 mana troop on, and let's say you got charge 1 and charge 2 and 6 tiles, or each, so 12 total, that's great, but the reality is that charge 1 for very fast. I don't hate that for 6 tiles. It's still weaker, I believe, than... well, it's less damage than Melosi, and I like Melosi's effect better. If you look at a brand new hero like the Ninja Topaz, just way more damage. So even on the very fast level, it's the low end. Now if you approach it from a multi-hitter perspective, now you're looking at 2 6-tile sets, 2 charges, so 12 tiles total. You know, it's kind of in the pack with all the other ones that are similar, if that makes sense. Like, it's really similar to White Rabbit, who hits 3. It's a little less than Zakenya, who's a yellow season 4 hero that does minus defense. It's sort of that Norns, Leonidas costume, Drake Fong, Akarog class. But if you think of all the heroes I mentioned, most of them give better effects. They do it in 8 to 10 tiles baseline, and all the 10-tile ones can get to functionally fast. So what I'm getting at is you have 6 tiles, he's outpaced a little bit. Charge 2 is going to take 12 tiles. It's decent. Like if it was just Charge 2 was fast and that's all the character got, I'd be okay with it. It'd be fine. It'd be really, really similar to Drake Fong. It'd basically be Drake Fong. But underwhelming at 1, slightly. Underwhelming at 2, especially given the time it takes to get. And again, this isn't charge. So he doesn't get the mana overflow that the ninjas get. So yes, he has to make fill it, fire, fill it, fire, fill it, fire to get to 3. And even when you get to 3 now, it's just still not really there. I mean, charge 3's about 10% higher than Wolfgang. A little higher than 10%, but not much. Less than 10% higher than Penalty, but very close to it. Penalty's from the Black Friday summons coming. Well, it's going to be Gargoyles. Penalty's from Gargoyles. And this is before her buff, which I think is in effect today for iOS and was for Android. My point is that at either of these tiers, he just doesn't live up. If this was a charge mechanic like the ninjas, he probably would not be on this list. But I think this is sort of their first kind of feeling out the charge mechanic before the charge mechanic existed. I know 2 players that use the in-game name of Thor that both don't like this hero of Thor. If that gives you any, who have leveled him, if that gives you any additional idea. But a long explanation of saying he just doesn't cut it compared to what's happened. So Thor overrated. Next up for overrated, I have Odin. And I do not have Odin. If you see my videos before, Thor and Odin were the last 2 heroes that I at least didn't have a chance to play with. I actually missed playing with some of the characters in beta a few months ago, but I still try out most of them. So I've never played with Odin. But when I asked a few line groups, I told them I was going to do this at the beginning, and the most suggested one to me was Odin, and I think that's multifaceted. One, many alliances are facing purple tanks, so when he's on defense, let's say at flank or wing, you're using up a lot of your yellow tiles, and I mentioned in the past this is usually balanced out, and I honestly think it is here. Balanced, but not overpowered, if that makes sense. Where I think the disconnect comes in is how well this hero synergized defensively with other similar heroes. So, like, offensively, it's very unlikely that you're going to run, like, Frigg, Odin, and Octros together, right? But defensively, he had this amazing synergy with Black Knight, there was a very, very short time in that time period between Odin came out and when raid formations became a thing, to where Black Knight tank and then Odin and Frigg flanks were very in. And that's an amazing synergy. It's one of the... Honestly, if raid formations hadn't come out, that would have probably been a thing for a while, because that was very, very strong at the time. And defensively, when you put multiple of these heroes on defense that sort of change and make you think about the tiles you leave on the board, it's a much more difficult thing to manage, especially if you have Frigg firing first, or Morel, or any of these other heroes that synergize well defensively. And he was very, very good defensively, and then a flood of very good yellow heroes came out. Raid formations decreases value, especially at the beginning, because at that time when raid formations were initially released, Sif could counterattack all 5. So he kind of got hit with a bunch of things at once, where raid formations decreased his value. A flood of strong yellows like Wolfgang, Phaline, Penulti, etc. came out. And when people start using him on offense, and that was the main complaint I got about him, was that it just didn't add up. Because on offense, it's much harder to create those perfect synergies for him than it is on defense. So again, I personally would probably still level this hero if I got him. I'm not even sure. Oh, I'm working on Kara. But after that, I'm not even sure who my next yellow project will be. But again, this was the most mentioned hero when I floated this idea out to some friends and acquaintances. So the other thing that hurt his value slightly is if you know what the null FOD loop is in the tower, basically starting at, I think, impossible 11 or 17, you could take null FOD and a mana generation hero and basically autoplay it. Well, that's also been changed. So several big things, a few little things knocked him down. Still very good in a pretty non-competitive class in Paladin. But again, this one was more from the community. So, and I generally see where they're coming from. But that's the story why Odin is on the overrated list. And last up for overrated yellow, I have Akarog. Similar to Odin, Akarog benefited from coming out at a time when there were simply no elite yellow defensive heroes, in my opinion. You were looking at Odin and potentially even something like Sir Roostly flanks, and he's still decent on defense. And this isn't a bad hero. I see people at highest tiers use him, and I get it. It's a decent hit at fast speed. I'll get into the reasons why I don't particularly like him that much. Ranger's an extraordinarily competitive class right now for emblems. But going through all the yellows that hit 2 or 3, so multi-hitters, there's only one that hits 2, and that's Zakenya. Zakenya has higher damage. All the versions of White Rabbit have slightly less damage, but give a very powerful effect of minus defense. Ironically, Thor second cast is very similar damage, and he already made this list. But you look at a new hero like Topaz, her charge 2 hits for almost 50% more damage. Norns has comparable damage and has utility in a lot of places, and that little mana cut. And I don't think you don't see Norns as much. So like Norns' baseline value is lower than Akarog's, who's higher. I mean, go through all these. Divana, a little bit less, a moderate amount of less damage, but it's not a huge gap. Maybe 17, 18%. Just eyeballing the damage numbers. Drake Fong. What I'm getting here is that you have a bunch of people that, Phaline does considerably more damage. A bunch of people that came out that just exceed him in damage and either have a better effect or better damage. I mean, even if you go into the heroes that hit all, a lot of them are, if you break down like a hit 3 and a hit 5 based on a single target damage, you know, that's a big factor too, right? Because, you know, you're not going to be hitting 5 or 3 every time. A lot of the new hit 5-star yellows are even competitive in this class, like Penalty's close to it, and probably in most cases is going to exceed it. If she's hitting, let's say 3 like Akarog does. But, and there was another one. I mean, I'm gonna butcher this name. It's the yellow from the Clash of Knights that is not Wolfgang. The other one, Eloy. I believe that's from Clash of Knights. But you have a bunch of hit 3s and even hit 5s that have comparable damage with some of them really good effects or really strong utility elsewhere. Akarog is in a highly competitive class, and this rearranging the enemy position, there are times it will definitely help, but a lot of times it's going to take away your ghost lane if you kill a tank, you know. Now something's in the way again, you can't ghost your tiles. So that's secondary part for most situations, unless you're also running Sorusli on offense with him. That secondary part's really a downside more than it is a benefit, in my opinion. So for all those reasons, I have Akarog. Not a bad hero. Still a solid hero, but I have Akarog in the overrated category. First up on underrated or undervalued, I have Sally. Sally benefits a lot here from lack of competition, particularly yellow 3 stars you can use in the rush format defensively. Yellow 3 stars that hit 2 or 3 or hit more than 1 are very, very slim. You have Armon, who hits all, Melia, who hits all, and you got the versions of Dawa. So there are not a lot of options for particularly defense on rush, and I do think this is where this character is better on defense, but also serviceable on rush offense, assuming you can hit at least 2. But yeah, just there aren't a lot of yellows that are good on rush defense, and he can play that role. There aren't a lot of yellows that, and I know this is a condition, so he could theoretically only hit 1, and sometimes he definitely will. But the yellows that can hit more than 1 are just so few and far between, particularly for the rush format. So for those main reasons, I have Sally in the underrated category. Up next, not moving far away, is Pixie. Pixie sort of does a effect like Hansel and Gretel. It's similar to Mindless, but it only drains 50% of the mana instead of draining it to 0. But really the big reason I have her on here is, if you've seen my other videos, 3-star rush right now is just terrible. It's, you know, I do a lot of wars, and I can go 70 to 75, maybe even high 70% against Alfric in rush war, because I have a lot of counters for it. 3 stars don't have counters to Treeville right now. In fact, you even see some alliances running, and I messed up in war against the Treeville rush tank. I'm not gonna lie about it. But he's so good in rush, Treeville is, and there aren't a lot of hard counters to Treeville. You have a few cleansers, you have Shrub Bear who can taunt, but there aren't really very many hard counters at all that can counter Treevil, and this mana control can counter Treevil and Rush. And honestly, that's why I put a few emblems on her. I'll probably put a few, well, it's a cleric, so I probably won't do anymore. I'm short on cleric, but I mean, there are so few hard counters for Treevil and Rush, 3-star Rush tournaments, that is, and she's a yellow one. So, for that reason, as dominant as Treevil is in 3-star Rush, Pixie can control that a little bit. So I have Pixie in the underrated category. Next up for 4-star, or for yellow, underrated, I have Deandre. Deandre is outstanding. As I mentioned quickly in the overrated section when mentioning Guldenbursty, Deandre has this awesome passive that's pretty much awesome everywhere, but to me even puts him above Guldenbursty for fighting Alfric, fighting against Alfric and Rush, because he has a pretty good chance to just shake it off. And there is a yellow 4-star or a yellow 5-star healer in Director Zuri that you could potentially pair him with, although that might be a little bit of an odd team, but there are pairings here that you can make in the Circus family that make it so you can definitely clear Alfric's Mindless and Rush. It's a good heal. He can flip minus defense to plus defense. He gives mana generation. To me, this is by far the best 4-star healer. Currently, I mean, I'm fighting currently in Gypsy Danger, and I know there are... Gypsy Danger is about 10th in the unofficial war rankings. And I know people in my alliance have 3 of these limit broken and fully emblemed for wars at that level, so he holds up at the highest levels. Can cleanse himself, the healing's effective. Minus defense is one of the most popular skills in the game, and he can counter that a bit. Mana is always great, so it's like he does everything that's awesome. Buff for buff boost. You know, I can cleanse himself in Rush. I prefer him over Guldenbursty in Rush, at least for fighting Alfric. All in all, just a outstanding 4-star. I would limit break this guy instead of Guldenbursty. He's just very, very good at virtually everything where you'd want to use a yellow 4-star healer. So yeah, I love him. He's miles away, or miles ahead of... I see way more Deandre, and I watch a ton of gameplay from a bunch of players in the top alliances and in my own alliance, and he's far and away the most used in terms of what I perceive as effective usage of 4-stars in top alliances. So to me, this is basically the new regard. Like, if you want to level up a bunch of healers, 4-star healers, and limit break them because you don't have 5-star healers, this guy's a very, very good candidate if tanks stay purple for a while. So, and he's in a not very competitive class. So most healers are clerics. So for all those reasons, love this hero. One of my favorite 4-stars in the game. Deandre, underrated. Next up for underrated, I have Wukong's costume. This is particularly in reference to the costume, not the regular version. And the big story here is just a general lack of guaranteed upfront damage at the yellow 4-star level. If you look at the yellow 4-star snipers, Griffin is very good. But in terms of yellow compared to all colors, for snipers, he's the only one that's even in the top half. So you basically have Griffin, who's a good sniper, and Jackal, who can set it up, but basically only one big hitter for the snipers. We move on to the multi-hitters. You have Gretel and Mist. For 4-star yellows that hit 2 or 3, it's Gretel and Mist. That's all. Mist is very good as more of a setup hero, and Mist is very good, we know this, but her hit is not particularly high. Neither is Gretel's. Is actually very low. If you use Gretel, it's going to be for the mana effect. And Mist is actually right in the middle for 4 stars that multi-hit. So we'll go and give Mist that, and we'll say Mist and Griffin hit hard for all yellow 4 stars. Moving on to the hit all. And you can see where I'm going with this already, right? Similar story. Anastasia can hit hard, but it's magic charge too. Dansborough technically hits very hard if you're lucky and can get the 1/3. If Guldenbursty gets hit in very, very high and reasonable amount of times, you could theoretically get decent damage, but all these are tied to conditions. Wukong actually does good hit all damage for a 4-star in general. I have him as the 8th highest damage for guaranteed upfront damage amongst all the 4 stars that hit all. See where I'm going with this. There just aren't yellows that can hit you really hard. Particularly, Griffin can do it. He's a sniper. Mist can almost do it. She hits 2. There are a couple hit alls that have been added that potentially could do it, but Anastasia is not going to be very good in Rush. Anastasia is the yellow from Magic Tower. Dansborough's unreliable. If you're counting on Guldenbursty for damage without very specific synergies, especially in tournaments where you can't use Gazelle or Snow White with him, then Guldenbursty is not going to hit hard. It's just if you want to hit multiple targets with a yellow 4-star and hit them hard, this is your guy. This is pretty much your only consistently hit somebody hard or hit more than one hard at the yellow 4-star level. So Wukong costume, underrated. Up next for underrated, I have Neith. I recall when Neith came out, she was not popular. The damage is low, and that there's no denying that, and that's a big reason why she was relatively unpopular when she came out. Why I have her on here, well, let me just explain when I realized that Neith wasn't bad. At that time, there were still a bunch of Gravemakers in defenses. He was easily the most dominant red. If you don't know, Gravemaker was the most popular defensive hero for like almost 2 years. So he was a big deal for a long time. He's not as big now. He's still pretty good. But he was a big deal. And when I first noticed Neith was being underappreciated a little bit, was when I was fighting at that time, and there'd be like a Neith and a Gravemaker flank. And I found myself like, well, I'm going to hit that Neith side first and try to kill Neith before Gravemaker. This is just such a problematic special on defense in particular. If you think of how good Li Zhu is in the 4-star tournaments, and Neith does that plus a little more, it's just so damn annoying. Are there better options? Yes. Is her offensive utility relatively limited? Of course. But defensively, especially in Rush, this is just a nasty, nasty flank in Rush. I'm surprised I basically never see her. You'd expect revivers on the wings and a taunt and an Alfric at the highest levels, but I'm surprised I never see this. This is a real pain in the ass special, and very annoying. Basically forces your hand to bring a cleanse, but then your cleanse will get the mana cut before you can cleanse the blind. So you basically need to have very specific heroes to make this not matter, you know, something like Toxicondra or something like that, activated before she fires. So while definitely definitely limited, but you know, if you're using like June or Leonidas or something on your defense, I would, and you have this hero, I'd put her in at the flank. She's a nasty flank. It's just an annoying special. But because she's so limited elsewhere, I wouldn't say that this hero's great. But considering how negative everything was about her at release, to people saying she's worthless and all that, and quite frankly how thin yellow tank is, just in general. I know the stats aren't there for... This is at 370, of course, but I know generally the stats aren't there, but it's just a pain of a special. So if you're using Season 1 yellows on your defense, or you don't have the options, or you have only slow heroes to put on your defense, or you're looking for something for rush defense, give her a look. She's pretty good there. And for those reasons, on the underrated list. Last up for yellow underrated, I have Poseidon. Poseidon is a yellow 5-star sniper. Let me pull up his damage numbers real quick. Make sure I don't misspeak here. His snipe is sort of in that class where you would expect it to be just marginally less than June, but and Aouda, the yellow 5-star sniper that can tinker with boosted health or punish boosted health. But, you know, way better than Baeyong, Melosi, Leonidas, Thor's first cast, that type of stuff. And, you know, less than Ureaus, but you'd expect that because Ureaus is fast. And obviously less than Zhang Fei, who's the new War of Three Kingdoms hero. So it's a snipe, but it is not what you would classify as, by any stretch of the imagination, as top tier damage. It's good damage, good guaranteed upfront damage. What makes him so valuable is the versatility of these other two bullets. All allies resist new negative mana effects for 3 turns. So that's everything. That isn't all new mana stat effects, or, you know, just mana generation. That's everything. That's direct mana reduction. That is minus mana generation. That's minus mana. That's what used to be called a mana stop. So, like, bringing mana generation to 0, like Proteus. And that is steal mana, like Onatel. It's everything. It's all negative mana effects. And you think of how many characters that are popular right now at the tank position, from Freya, who cuts your mana on death, to Bera, who cuts your mana on death, to Ferrant, who cuts your mana when his counterattack is up. That's a lot of heroes that he counters, and I haven't even gotten to the last part. All allies resist new effects that block the usage of special skills. This is where things like Mindless and Silence come in. So, in Rush, Alfric. In regular War, Ferrant, Freya, Bera. You want to look at beyond the tank position, how common Costume Alassi is? Resist all of it. As time has gone on, mana has become one of the fundamental sort of shifts to where you're seeing these characters that can control mana and boost mana are almost now rising to the level of, like, not quite there yet, but almost to the level of like a minus defense type hero. Nulfod's not a good tank because he heals. Nulfod's a good tank because of that mana addition. And the flip side, Poseidon can resist all that. Every Mindless, every Silence, every mana effect, including the ones that happen on death. Relevance against almost all the popular tanks. partially because of his color relationship, but even going beyond that to the flanks that do these nasty mana effects from, and wings, I mean, everything, Phaline, Alacy, and he synergizes well, so, with a lot of those other yellow options as well, but, I don't think people realize how much this is. This is everything in terms of mana and special skills he blocks. So, a must-have for high-end rush, and just still a ton of value virtually everywhere in the game in terms of offense and preventing nasty things related to your mana and special skills. So that will conclude the fifth and final part of Overrated, Underrated. I apologize for the long delay on this last one. As if you play the game, you know there's a lot going on, and I recently switched alliances, so if you made it through all 5 parts in the probably over 2 hours of video, I sincerely appreciate it, and hopefully in the next coming weeks I'll be able to come up with a new concept for a series of content that you guys will enjoy. Thank you for watching.